Hello and welcome to On Second Street. Today we're going to be talking about the K-12 system. Specifically, we keep seeing these stories pop up with really questionable behavior by staff and other activities in the school system. Are these just isolated cases, or do we have a bigger problem with indoctrination and other bigger problems in the K-12 system? Here to chat with me about it is Barbara Kay. She's a longtime columnist with the National Post, and Paige Mcpherson, who's the Director of Education Research at the Fraser Institute. Thank you both for taking a few minutes to chat today about this important topic. Barbara, I'll start with you. I mean, you've been writing about politics, following it closely for decades. Do you think it's fair to say that we have a problem in the school system, or are these just isolated cases that are maybe making the system look bad when it comes to indoctrination and other things that we're seeing?
I think there's a very serious problem in the educational system, K-12 and beyond, and we have had that problem for some time. I look back on stuff that I wrote about years and years ago, and it's been there, maybe not in plain sight to everybody for all these years, but, teachers teach what they were taught. And if you look at for example, the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education, OISE, at the University of Toronto, and you look at what they're teaching, they are teaching ideology, and that is what is being passed down through the teachers and the school boards, to the children.
How did this happen, Barbara? Because, I went through the public school system. I don't remember any teachers really pushing their own ideological beliefs on us in the classroom. It may have happened, I'm sure it did, but it certainly didn't seem to be prevalent. And yet, you're saying that we do have a serious problem. It seems like we're seeing a lot of stories pop up in the news that don't look very good. How did this transition occur?
Well, it began in the late 60s with the student revolution. You could say perhaps the anti-Vietnam demonstrations heralded. That was sort of the starting point for when a lot of ideology that had been kind of an intellectual exercise up until, before that, suddenly became very aggressively promoted in the universities and the free speech movement. And from the late 60s on, you've had a very intellectually radical element that has dominated the universities. It stayed in the universities for a couple of decades. But then in the 90s, what happened was that all this ideological stuff, they started teaching students it's not enough to just understand the power imbalance, and race, anti-racism, and all of the stuff that now constitutes diversity, inclusion. Didn't have those names then. Politically correct, we called it. Politically correct was the name that we gave it. It wasn't enough to just understand it. You had to be an activist to make the world a better place. So your role as a student at first was to go to protests and to do your part. And then when you went out into the world, whatever job you were going to take, you had to bring your mission to be a social justice activist with you. And that is exactly what has happened, so that the students of the 80s and 90s are now in positions of power today. And they believe in their ideology the same way that many religious people believe in their religions as the revealed truth. So there's no room there for argument. And besides which, in the universities, the other thing that happened was that all conservative thinkers were kind of driven out of the university. They just, it was, teachers, left-wing teachers choosing new candidates, and they chose them on the basis largely of their ideology. So I think Paige would agree that what happened in the 70s and 80s and 90s was, as conservative thinkers who normally would have gone into academia as a natural pathway, a career pathway, felt they were very unwelcome. They were kind of frozen out. And then you saw the rise of think tanks. You saw the rise of research institutes, Fraser, amongst them. And that's where conservative academics have ended up largely, or in other pathways, but they're no longer in the universities.
On that note, let's take a commercial break. When we come back, Paige, I want to ask you about your thoughts on this.